Hopefully Rivalry Week treated everyone fantastically. Oh, if I haven't mentioned it already, go blue. Woo! What's going on? Welcome back. And this is part 2 of the Illinois Bunn Special Fishscale 16 size 23 jewel. And the reason why I'm doing this intro, I was just gonna go from the cleaning to the reassemble, but I wanna let you guys know that here on this channel, I am trying my best to be better than the last video that I made. With that being said, I kind of went above my pay grade and I started thinking, I was like, hey, what if I move the camera here and this one over here? It'd probably be better. And while I was cleaning those parts, I went ahead and rearranged the cameras because I thought it would show you guys at home a better view of what I get to see on the bench every day. When I looked up, it looked fine. But little did I know that when I put my head down, my head did get in the way, so I want to apologize for that. With that being said, some of the oiling I had to cut out. Some of the assembly had to be switched to a different camera. I am trying my best to get better. And as always, if you haven't already, please like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when we have a new video. All right, let's go ahead and jump back into this. The parts are all clean. We did the hard part, taking it all apart. Now let's do the easy part and put it back together. I'm gonna go ahead and start with the train bridge, get the cap jewel oiled and put back in there. Before we do that, we're gonna go ahead and put in the lower jewel. And as you can remember from the previous video, I went ahead and left the other 2 jewels in there because they did not have a cap and they could be thoroughly clean going through my cleaning machine. Now here is the cap. I'm going to set this to the side, get out my oil and my oiler. On most of my jewels, I like to use Mobius 8000. And here's a little hint or tip for all of you self-starters that want to teach yourself, get into this. There is such thing as too much oil on watches. So you definitely want to be careful how generous you are at applying this. It's not like a vehicle or working on a car where you can never, or an engine, you can't use too much oil. With watches you can, because what the oil can attract is dirt, dust, debris, and that will bind your watch up and make it vastly underperform. Just my 2 cents on it. And let's go ahead and screw in the cap jewel and see that? Okay. As I'm struggling with this, let's go ahead and talk about some of the pitfalls I had first getting into this. Let's go ahead and set this aside. Let's go ahead and get the main plate and start working on this. And back to one of my biggest hurdles or obstacles was not remembering where the parts went or how the parts fit. But in all honesty, learning to use my tweezers, and it didn't matter if they were the number 3, the number 5, if they were $100 tweezers or $5 tweezers. Things shot out of my tweezers and went flying across the floor, up in the air. They just went everywhere, and the majority of my time when I first started out was on my hands and knees looking for the parts that I lost, and at one point my knees were bruised. No joke, it was ridiculous. So my advice to you, if you're thinking about getting into this, practice your dexterity with your tweezers, picking things up, because if you don't have a lot of parts and you don't have a lot of spare movements, it's going to be tough if you don't have that tiny screw or a jewel or any part. Here you see me, I am using one of my staking set tools, and I'm pushing it flat so I'm not scratching anything, because they do fit very tight. But learning to be able to use tweezers properly will be half the battle getting into this hobby profession. Some people watching this might be like, well, why is he going ahead and taking apart all these other screws and cap jewels and the lower jewels? Isn't that a little bit more time? How about just throw everything in the cleaning machine and let it take care of it? Well, a couple reasons for that. One, the cleaning machine will not do a very good job of getting dirt, oil, debris that is built up over many years or even decades out, no matter how good the solution you have. The other reason is if you have a broken part, say you dropped it, has a broken balance or a pivot on one of the wheels, part of the train, that has to go somewhere. That will be in the watch. And most of the time, if it isn't a cap jewel, it will still be there. So part of that small pivot that broke off will be in between the lower jewel and the cap jewel, which once again, if you fix that part, it won't work properly. You try to put it all together, the height will be off, and you could possibly damage the new part that you're replacing. So it does pay off to take a little bit more time, do it right, because it will save you in the end time and money, which is both very valuable. Now we're going to go ahead and start reassembling this balance cock. As you can see, I did leave the regulator and some of the components on there and just took off that pain in the butt top jewel. And why I say it's a pain in the butt is that it sets from the top and screws from the bottom. So to set these, it takes a little bit more to do it, especially when you don't take it fully apart like I did here. And as you can see here, I got the top on, and now I have to screw in the screws from the bottom. So from the top, you can see the bottom of the actual screws that hold in that cap. I do like the top cap jewels way better than I like the jewels that are screwed on from the bottom. Just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys find these are easier? Let me know. I don't always struggle with them, but they just take a little bit more time and concentration. Now let's go ahead and start working on the keyless works on this pocket watch. And while we start putting in all the springs and the levers and the winding stem, I'd like to talk a little bit about Illinois Pocket Watch Company as a whole and who this watch is actually named after. And when I kind of sign off videos, I say the Hunt's Reel. And the Hunt's Reel on watches, pocket watches, wrist watches, clocks, whatever, you get the hunt of a collectible. You get the hunt of 100-plus-year-old item, sometimes older, sometimes not as old. But behind every company, there's a story. So there's a hunt there. And we're going to go ahead and put in the clutch lever spring. And a lot of these screws do have little shoulders on them. And when you go, just make sure they're pretty much in the center, or it won't get a good fit and the action won't work properly on the springs as they normally should. Okay, going into the hunt of the history on these watches outside of a monetary value, the history is rich on most all of these companies, whether it be Swiss or English or American, German. It doesn't matter. Most of these companies have a story. And if you do a little bit of research, most of the time it will just amaze you. And that's one of the things that made me dive into pocket watches and wrist watches, is because there was so much technology and so much at stake back in the day when trains were a huge part of our economy, hands down. And when Illinois Watch Company was first founded in 1869, John Bunn, which this watch Bunn Special is named after, was one of the first directors of the company, and later became as high up as a vice president, which is very cool history on him and his family. Take a look at that. He was friends with Abraham Lincoln before he was president, and probably another reason why the A Lincoln is one of the lines in the Illinois lineup. I could go on, but it's just one of the different rabbit holes that can take you down this great industry that watches and pocket watches have to offer. And right here, it is a little tricky because if you could see, there's a little dot on the top side of the setting lever, and on the back side of that is a little pivot that sticks out that you have to get it in the hole so that when you use the setting lever, it will retract on its own and it doesn't just float around, it's held in place. And as you can see here, I have to get that spring into the shoulder of that so it can move freely. And I don't always tighten up the screws until I actually have everything in the place I actually need it, because if you put it in there the wrong way, tighten it down, you can bend it, and that would be a problem. Now we're going to go ahead and put in the minute wheel. Secure that with the screws that are absolutely enormous and in no way, shape, or form hard to find on the floor. Clearly joking. So we'll get those tightened down. But clearly, if anyone is looking to do this hobby, get into it, just practice with tweezers. You can get some cheap ones on Amazon and just practice picking up anything around the house, paper clips, whatever. And clearly we got that working properly, and I'm going to go ahead and rotoco off the pivots on the pallet fork. And I don't run my pallet forks through the watch cleaning machine for the simple fact that I do not want the shellac, which is a type of, not glue, but it holds it down without damage. And actually it's pretty cool because you can heat the shellac up and adjust it, and then when it cools off, it hardens into place. I don't want to get that off or have any of those jewels fall out, and I've found in previous times actually cleaning them through, the chemicals do eat that and can ruin the shellac, and then the jewels fall out and you don't have a working watch anymore. Now we're going to go ahead and oil and put in our jewel and cap jewel onto our pallet fork bridge. That is one of the tiniest screws in the watch. But the detail on this watch is amazing because the cap of that is gold. All of it, every part of this watch is just wonderful. Detail driven. And we're going to want to be gentle when we set this bridge down on the pallet fork, because the pallet fork pivots are very tiny and easily breakable. So you always want to check and double check to make sure you have it in the right spot. And then you're going to see me when I reassemble watches. I do like to tighten them probably 80 to 90% down, go back, make sure nothing has moved or got out of place, because if you go ahead and tighten them down right away, you can hear a pop, and that pop means you broke a pivot or a jewel or both. And once again, that's going to lead to more time, money, and headaches. And there we go. Now let's move on. Get the train bridge ready. Get these out of our way for right now. I'll put those on after I get the wheels in place. There's our center wheel. There's our seconds, our fourth wheel, and there's our third wheel. And there's the escapement wheel. Here's our mainspring barrel. The cool thing about the barrel is there's our 22nd and 23rd jewel hidden in that barrel, which I think is just fascinating. And later models of the Bunn Special has it on the motor barrel and the opposite side in the plate, in the main plate, whereas the 22nd and 23rd jewel of this watch is actually housed in the mainspring barrel, which is very cool. Get that center wheel in there. Get our screws ready so we can put the train bridge on. And get these holes lined up, set them on gently. You'll kind of rock into place. Sometimes you do have to maneuver and get the pivots lined up properly because they shift and push one another out of the way or at an angle. So you got to be careful. This does take time. This does take patience. Once again, first starting out, I never realized how much frustration / anger I kept in my fingers. If I would have just pumped the brakes, maybe step back a little bit, come back to it, I probably would have saved quite a bit of parts from being broke, but lesson learned, and now I can put it together without breaking things. Once again though, I'm going to go ahead, screw in the 2 screws about 85% of the way down, and then I'm going to check to make sure that the whole train is kind of running free. And you can kind of see the pallet fork down there jiggle back and forth. That tells me we got it where it needs to be. And now it's 100% tight. Let's double check, and it looks good to me. And I'm gonna go ahead and kind of mess around with it a little bit, making sure all the jewels look right, all the pivots look right, the pallet fork is interacting as it should with that escapement wheel. And now here we have the winding pinion and the clutch, and we're trying to get the clutch into the clutch lever so that we can go ahead and start on the barrel bridge side of this pocket watch. Here we have the click spring that we need to put in. That is the click that I have right here. This is what makes the sound when you are winding a watch. The click, 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 click. It's a pretty original name. Don't know where they came up with it, but it works. And now we're going to go ahead and get this, if I can find the right screw. Yeah, that looks right. Get that in there to hold that down. Tighten it up. And you can see there is a little knob that it has to go over so that the spring can do its job. And once again, tighten it down all the way. And it is working. And then here is the power. And if you can see right at the base of that flower pattern on the inside, that is where one of the jewels are, and on the other side, the other jewel is right there where I'm holding this at, sticking out of the arbor. It's right in here, and it's a clear jewel. So there are your 22nd and 23rd jewels, and I'm just gonna dab it with a little oil so it's as frictionless as possible. Got the bottom side first, now got the top side. Get our movement back over here, so we can just slip it on the side. And this bridge, honestly, is the easiest to put on. Everything just falls into place. That center wheel falls into the jewel it should. And that right there, that gear is the ratchet wheel. That is what goes over the power. And you can see here, there's a little square in the center of this wheel. And there is a square part that sticks out of the arbor. And that needs to be put in place properly so it's flush. And let's get all the screws over here so that we can just pop them into place. There's 3 screws that hold this train bridge down. Reason for that is there is a lot of torque going on this bridge with that ratchet wheel and the mainspring. So to make sure it doesn't slip or pivot or turn, we need to have it securely down to the main plate. I know I said I do screw down things 80-90% of the way. On this bridge I don't, for the fact that it's a pretty big opening, the center wheel jewel, and you can see that everything was in place, so I went ahead and just screwed it down 100% of the way. This screw is going to be righty-tighty and it holds it into place. The winding gear that we're going to start on right now, that is the screw that goes in the opposite way, so it will not unwind itself. Make sure we get a little bit of oil on here to help it smoothly wind. And there's part of our winding wheel. Put the winding wheel on last because it does have that ability to move around. There's a centerpiece in there that holds it in place, and it lets you adjust it around the ratchet wheel. And there we go. No, it's not backwards. We're tightening it down by going the opposite way, or commonly known as reverse threading. And just trying to find one of my winding keys. Go ahead, wind this up, and make sure it's winding as it should, because sometimes those gears can be off. Sometimes the way that you put in the clutch or the winding wheel can throw things off, but this one is working as it should. And if everything is 100%, I should put very little force on this pallet fork and it should automatically tick. And it's doing what it should. I didn't have to adjust. I didn't have to put any pressure on that. It just went by itself with the slightest of ease. That way, when you actually put the balance wheel assembly in, it will take off, or at least should. I'm going to go ahead and oil the train jewels that were open, because we have already oiled the cap jewels. And let's go ahead and assemble the rest of the balance. All we got to do is put that little collet that is on the hairspring into the opening. I did put this in one dip, in and out, to clean off whatever was on it. I'm just going to go ahead and use my Rotoco and get anything else that could possibly be on it off. Want this free from all debris, dust, whatever. Any residue that may be left behind from the one dip. Some people put the balance wheel on it first, put it on top. I just kind of taught myself how to do it this way and turn it upside down. Usually drops right in with the right screwdriver and tighten this little guy down. There we go. Now all I need to do is get that hairspring through the regulator pins. There's two little pins right there on the regulator, and you're going to want to just drop that hairspring in between those two arms, and that helps regulate it going faster or slower so you can get accurate time. There we go. Looks good to me. I don't know about you guys, but it's starting to look like a watch to me. And oh, there we go. That's what I like to see. It's starting to take off as soon as we put it in. There is a little play, and for whatever reason, that hairspring did fall out of that regulator pins, so I'm just gonna have to get that back in. And there we go. I'll push that down a little bit. Aha, that's what I like to see. That is joy and a stress relief, because the less you have to take these apart to readjust them, less problems you have. And it is doing and looking exactly the way I want it to. And now that we got the gunk and everything out of it, what I'm going to do is reset the regulator to in the middle between fast and slow. Throw it on the timer, make sure it is keeping accurate time. Before I do that, I just kind of tilt it upside down, see if it's going to stop, and it didn't. Let's go ahead and just clean this dial off. It was nice to begin with, so I'm just going to take a little microfiber cloth and get any dust, debris off of it. I just love these dials. The enamel pocket watch dial is just absolutely amazing. And the double sunk one, which this one is really cool because there's actually 3 parts that consist of it. You have the outside ring, you have the middle, and you have the seconds wheel. And if you look on the back of it, they are soldered in, which is just incredible. Get the canyon pinion on, get a little bit of oil on there so things will run free. There's a little dial washer to help separate it from the movement itself. And line that up, put it in, and get our screws to hold down the dial feet. These screws also, I don't do the 80-90% of tightening. I just tighten them up because there's really nothing that could possibly screw up if you tighten them down too much or all the way. Tightening them up too much will cause damage, but tightening them the way they should be tightened, I mean, it's not going to do anything except hold the dial in place as you're putting on the other 2 screws. Wow, I mean, if it's just a beautiful watch. And if you touch the balance wheel, it should start up as it did. It shows that the mainspring has enough power, but we already figured that out when we put it on the watch timer. Sorry, I didn't get to show you the watch timer. It's set up on the other side of my shop. Don't really have a camera set up over there. That is one thing I'm gonna try to work on as I'm getting this dust ring on. In the case, we want to keep that crown popped out so that there is enough room to get that watch back in. You just kind of want to work it a little bit and push it down, help it hold it in place. On the 12 o'clock side, as you're holding down the 6 o'clock side, put in the case screw, get it started, and tighten it down. Now, you can over tighten these, and if you over tighten them, they will stop your watch because it will push on the plates and not allow it to pass the power to the train. FYI. You don't want it too loose that it moves and rattles and shakes, but you also don't want it so tight that it stops the works from moving. We're going to go ahead and put the hour hand, minute hand, and second hand on. And yes, I still have another dial washer there. I put on a new one because, like I said, I don't really want to work on this watch again. Let's pull up the setting lever on it so that we can just put it down wherever we want and work it to, I like to do the 12 o'clock position. Yep. Make sure it is flush on. And now we can get the minute hand on. There are tools that you can use that you can set down, have it square and flush. So some people, I probably wouldn't recommend using tweezers because you could slip and ruin your dial, scratch it. So if you're doing that, be very, very careful. Probably gonna have people in the comments, you should use different tools for it. Yes, I agree. It's just what I'm accustomed to. Here I am checking to make sure there is clearance between the hour hand and the seconds hand. Sometimes people put watches back together and they stop. One of the reasons is the tip of the hour hand hits the second hand and it stops it. And there's a really easy fix for that. You just have to check your hands. It has nothing to do with the way that you service the watch. It's just taking these on, taking them off, not pushing them down far enough can affect it because the power isn't that great that it can just bounce off of that. And sometimes they do wedge. And yes, I know I cleaned it off earlier, but it's funny how quick dust or debris can get on the face of the dial. So just doing one last check with the Rotoco, getting the front bezel on. Love that crystal. And now we're gonna go ahead and put on the back. These watches, once again, the history of them are treasures, and I am so happy that this baby of mine is cleaned up and ready to go back into the collection, running as it should. I want to go ahead and thank you for coming on this adventure with me. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And as always, be on the lookout for mechanical art. The hunt is real. Until next time, see you later.